After a much-needed off day, the Royals bounced back in a big way against Minnesota. What did we think of the series? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And as always, questions and comments can be left to me on Twitter, or you can find us on the YouTube page as well and leave your questions there. And typically, we would be giving you episodes Monday through Friday, but since we weren't able to give an episode this past Monday, was going to give a Sunday night episode after the Royals sweep the Minnesota Twins out of Kansas City. They now have a 2.5 game lead over Minnesota in second place in the Central, and of course the second wild card spot with just 18 games to go. So couldn't have been a better weekend if you were a Royals fan. The Chiefs won on Thursday. The Royals had that off day that was much needed, of course, and then they win Friday, come from behind on Saturday and win. And then today I was out there at Kauffman Stadium and they shut out the Twins 2-0. And I would say at this point, you don't want to jinx anything. You don't want to jump the gun. But now after winning 4 straight, and keep in mind with this, Boston hosted the White Sox this weekend, and Boston lost today of the finale. But they were going for a sweep today, and I think everybody had looked to this weekend as a very dangerous spot for the Royals, playing a team they usually don't stack up well against, and Boston would have a chance to gain some ground with the White Sox in town. But in the end, it's actually the Royals picking up a game on the Boston Red Sox. Right now, as I'm doing this podcast, Tigers are leading the Athletics, and the Dodgers are leading the Guardians. So in a perfect scenario, the Royals could have an even bigger lead over Detroit with under 20 games to go and pick up another game on Cleveland in the American League Central race. But the White Sox beat the Red Sox today at Fenway Park 7-2. Royals win 2-0. So now you look at the wild card picture and determine where everybody's at. The Royals are 3 games back of Baltimore for the top wild card spot. They've got a 2.5 game lead over Minnesota, a 5.5 game lead over Seattle, a 6.5 game lead, or excuse me, that is a 6 game lead at this point in time over Seattle before they have their game, I think, later on tonight, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe they already had played. Seattle looks like they don't play today. I guess it was an off day for Seattle. No, excuse me, they did win. They beat St. Louis 10-4 at Busch Stadium. So they are at this point in time 6 games back of Kansas City. Then the Royals have a 6.5 game lead over Boston, a 6.5 game lead over Detroit, and they've got a 7.5 game lead over the Tampa Bay Rays. So that's what the wild card picture looks like right now for Kansas City. And with 18 games to go, again, we talked about this even during the losing streak, that the Royals had the buffer, if you will. They had a little bit of that space to have a mishap or two, go on a 5-game losing streak, go on a 6-7 game losing streak. But at the same time, with the time running out on other teams, they had to play their best baseball during that stretch. And for the Royals' sake, if they were to win 4 in a row, 5 in a row, that all but buries the teams that are chasing them. I mean, that's just counting down more days on the calendar until you get to October. And now, with the gauntlet almost wrapped up, they've got one more series against the Yankees, which begins tomorrow. We'll preview that in our final segment. But there's 3 games left in the gauntlet, and the Royals are 8-9. And that's with losing Vinny Pasquantino. That's with a 7-game losing streak. That's with losing Michael Lorenzen, who's scheduled for a rehab start on Tuesday. So as we brought up on that injury report episode a few days ago, we expected Michael Lorenzen to be coming back sometime soon. Now they're getting that rehab process ramped up a little bit. They had lost some members in the bullpen, right? So the Royals had been battling all types of adversity, and yet here they are, 8-9, and that brutal, terrible stretch of play. The stretch of games they had to go through and still have to go to 3 more times was unmatched with everybody else in baseball. Nobody had been dealing with a schedule like that over the span of 2 weeks or so. I mean, actually 3 weeks, being 20 games. Everybody else got a little bit of a take it easy series or kick your feet up type of series, playing a bad opponent. And now the Royals will be getting that after the Yankees series. They will get to see the Pirates in Pittsburgh. They will see the Washington Nationals, who are out of it. They will see the Giants, who are pretty much out of it at this point. So they have some games on their schedule that are favorable. But I go to this point for today, our opening segment here. The Royals needed that off day, I think, more than anybody in baseball. 14 games in 13 days. They were completely fatigued. And when I was out there at Kauffman Stadium on Tuesday, I think it was, for the 7th and final loss on that 7-game losing streak, it just looked like they were so fatigued in so many ways. Offensively, pitching, bullpen, everything about the team felt worn down. And that off day came at the perfect time because they had just snapped the losing streak. Tommy Pham had given them a jolt with the 3-run home run on Wednesday. They had a chance to have a true off day in which they get to sleep in their own bed, have the off day, go to bed that night in their own bed. They're not flying around and getting in somewhere at 3 a.m. and going to the hotel. It's not really a true off day. They had a true off day, and it is not a surprise to me they came out on Friday and played very well. Cole Reagans, who now is over 200 strikeouts, became the first 200 strikeout pitcher of the season for the Royals since 2009 with Zach Greinke, and I believe only the 5th pitcher all-time in franchise history to have 200 Ks in a season. And that's probably going to get, he's going to put himself top 3, I think, for single-season strikeouts in Royals history. So good for Cole Reagans, but also better for the Royals and the way they played on Friday. On Saturday, in front of a national broadcast, nationally televised game on Fox, the Royals were completely silent for 7 innings. They had 1 hit going into the 8th inning, and they stormed back, score 4 runs. Lucas Erceg slams the door. The crowd was loud. The players were saying that's the loudest they've heard Kauffman Stadium this year. And then today, Michael Wacha just doing what he's done for the better part of 2.5 months, just shoving, absolutely shoving in every way, shape, and form. And Chris Bubich, clean inning in the 8th. Lucas Erceg had a leadoff runner on. Christian Vasquez, who I think was 3 for 3 in the game, all very similar hits. He finds a way to dance out of that, and you leave Kauffman Stadium, or at least I left Kauffman Stadium today, going, this is about as good as I've felt all season long about postseason chances. And that bounce back they were able to have from the losing streak, it shows you the resilience of this team. And even, again, I don't screenshot or take receipts from anybody. I think at times it can be a little bit childish, and it's not my place. And I don't think it's the right thing always to call out somebody for a bad take, because I've made plenty of them. I've made some terrible takes before. My worst one ever is when the Royals traded for Cole Reagans, or at least I should say my worst one ever since taking over this podcast. When they traded for Cole Reagans, I said, I'm not that excited about this Cole Reagans guy. I'm far more excited about I'm already blanking on his name now, Ronny Cabrera, who's still down in the lower levels of the Royals minor league system. I thought you should have gotten more for Aroldis Chapman. And yet Cole Reagans is the guy that had over 200 strikeouts this year. So I've had my fair share of it. But I do remember the feeling after the Royals had lost their 7th straight game of, see, this team is done. They can't rebound after the injury to Vinny Pasquantino. Lucas Erceg's hurt. Our pets' heads are falling off. All these things, right? But to me, what has stayed consistent all year long is this team's ability to just flush bad things, to forget about either what's going on or what happened the night before. And if you just give them that reset, which was on Thursday, they can show out in the way they did this weekend. I mean, Minnesota had a half-game lead over them, and I would have been fine just taking even 1 of 3 if that meant everybody else is losing. Just don't get swept again the rest of the year, and you're going to have a very good spot come October. But the Royals go above and beyond that. and the pitching was phenomenal. They had 2 shutouts in this series. Rocco Baldelli said it was the most unprofessional series the Twins have had all season long, and I wouldn't go as far to say that, but I'm also not managing that team. I don't watch every single Twins game. I think a lot of credit goes to the Royals for how their pitchers fared in this one, how their bullpen did, some of their timely hits, their ability to come back on Saturday. And now they've put Minnesota in a very, very interesting spot with 18 games to go. The Royals don't see Minnesota the rest of the year. Surprisingly, they only went 1 game under 500 against the Twins this year, and it felt a lot worse than that just because the Twins had beaten up on them so badly at Target Field. But now the Royals have a cushy 2.5 game lead over Minnesota. Yes, they'll have 3 more games against the Yankees, but even if they lose all 3, which I'm not going to make that prediction, 8-12 is what I said would be the bare minimum there. If you go 8-12, I'm not feeling great, but you just don't want to go worse than. I could stomach 8-12. Now you're 8-9 with 3 games to go. You could walk away either 500 in the gauntlet, or if you somehow swept the Yankees, I'm not predicting that either, but you would have a winning record in the gauntlet. And when you lost all those key guys during that stretch, shows the resilience of this team. And that has been one of their strongest attributes alongside starting pitching. But man, I mean, what an impressive series. Cole Reagan's phenomenal. Alec Marsh was good enough and didn't get any run support, but he kept the team in it. The bullpen was really good all weekend long. And the offense just finding ways to win in the days without Vinny Pasquantino. And now 14 games over 500. They are 1 away from 80, and they are 3 wins away from having their highest win total in a season since 2015. If you can recall, in 2016, they went 81-81. Year after that, the final year of the core, they went 80-82, and then had a lot of 100-loss seasons after that. So 14 games over 500, 18 games to go. Up next, they will have the New York Yankees and the Bronx. We'll take our first break of the show. When we come back, I want to dive into Tommy Pham and the importance of him in this lineup, how he's been playing every day, and how he's being perceived in the clubhouse. Because at one point in time, we had a controversial episode about should the Royals bring in Tommy Pham. I got some pushback on it. I'm not going to go parading anything around, but I do feel like he was the perfect guy for this team when he joined Kansas City. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. So this is one of our unique episodes of the week. We usually don't have them on Sunday, but we didn't have one on Monday. Wasn't able to double up on an episodes this week, so wanted to give a Sunday night episode going into another important week for the Royals, another week of a playoff push. Should be lots of fun. So again, if you have any questions or comments for me tonight, I'll try to answer them in tomorrow's episode. Or if you have a Mailbag Friday question, I'll try to bookmark it so that we can answer it come the end of next week. But Royals get it done today against the Twins 2-0. They sweep Minnesota, have a 2.5 game lead over Minnesota with just 18 games to go. They held a playoff spot by over 6 games at this point, and it's looking likelier and likelier that this team will be bound for October. And another good week of baseball. And I think at that point, you start wondering, where are they going to clinch a playoff berth? What will that playoff berth look like? And how can you start lining up your arms to throw in a best-of-3 or a best-of-5 series? So lots of fun on deck for the Royals. They found a way to bounce back after that 7-game losing streak. And they found a way to tread water, survive after a devastating blow to their team and Vinny Pasquantino breaking his thumb in Houston. They lost Lucas Ursig for a little bit of time on that same play. Look, things were not going well, right? And I want to give credit to J.J. Picollo, as we've done numerous times on this episode before. But I want to give credit to J.J. Picollo for what he was able to do shortly after those injuries were confirmed. And we got the timeline, and we got some of the roster moves for it. He went out there and said, look, we're not going to be able to replace Vinny Pasquantino with what we have. And we're still in a playoff push. And we're not going to kick our feet up and say, well, we still have a 4.5 game lead. We should be just fine. He went out there and in one day claims Tommy Pham and Robbie Grossman off waivers. He trades for Yuli Gurriel. All 3 of those guys joined the team. And yes, it took a few games to get going and to really figure out how you want to incorporate those guys. But Tommy Pham's playing every day. Robbie Grossman has been good in the games that he's gotten to start, whether it be in the outfield or it be at DH. Yuli Gurriel, as a 40-year-old, has hit safely in all 3 games that he started in. So it's not everything. It's not the 96 RBIs that Vinny Pasquantino had, but I tip my cap to JJ Picollo for him going, look, we're not running out a lineup again that has Nick Lofton, Garrett Hampson, Dairon Blanco, and Adam Frazier in. We're going to need more established hitters. We're going to need guys that can fit well in this clubhouse. And Tommy Pham was one of them. And Tommy Pham was the guy when they picked him up as he's not going to play once or twice a week. He's going to play every single day, whether it be in left, right, or DH. And today he DH'd. He had a big walk in that game. 2 walks, in fact. He had a hit that tied the game. It was a slow roller, but he beat it out, and there was an error that tied the game for Kansas City. But coming up in that spot after striking out 3 times, didn't try to do too much and got a little bit lucky, but still, night before that, had a RBI double, had the 3-run home run on Wednesday that sparked this team and eventually snapped the 7-game slide. Tommy Pham's been exactly what the Royals needed him to be. And when I was in the clubhouse on Tuesday and I asked Paul DeYoung about Tommy Pham playing with him on the White Sox this year, both them came from desperate situations of playing on a team that had lost 130,000 games, it feels like. He did say about Tommy that he's somebody that wants to play every day. He is going to do everything that he can to win. And he is going to be a guy that has all the hustle. He has all the heart. He's gritty. He's exactly who you want on the team. And I can recall an episode we did about Tommy Pham when he was still in Chicago and the trade deadline was approaching. And I was met with a lot of pushback of, I don't want that guy on the team. He's a clubhouse cancer. And he's not good enough, quite honest with you. He's 36 years old. He's got a negative WAR, all those things. You can throw stats all in any sort of argument, right? You can throw them at people. You can use them in a research type of way. Stats are important in baseball, right? And all kinds of stats are. I don't always use batting average or RBIs for everything, but I also don't always use the analytical stats, right? The FanGraphs stats or the Baseball Savant stats, because I do think you combine all of them together. And there are benefits to each and every stat in baseball, right? Even if you're a 330 hitter, but some of the advanced profiles of the batted ball data doesn't support you, you're still a 330 hitter, right? You're a good hitter. You can't hit 330 in the big leagues or 300 in the big leagues and be a bad player. You might not hit the ball that hard. You might not do everything perfectly, but you're still a valuable asset to the team. And Tommy Pham, though a lot of the advanced metrics didn't support him, and he was a 260 hitter and a negative WAR because he's bad defensively. Look, he wasn't the perfect player, but I also knew approaching the deadline, he would be cheap and he would be better than what the Royals had at certain spots in the lineup. And then when the Cardinals put him on waivers, it became a no-brainer. You don't have to give up anything for Tommy Pham. And you bring him in, and there still might have been that concern of, well, he's a bad clubhouse guy. And I chuckled at that a little bit because there had been this had been a league-wide thing. It wasn't just the Royals that people looked at Tommy Pham as a bad clubhouse guy. And I remember I had read this article when he was in New York with the Mets, and Buck Showalter was still the manager. And Buck Showalter was asked about Tommy Pham not being a good clubhouse guy, and he said basically it was absurd. That's not the case. Tommy's just blunt. He's going to tell you as it is sometimes, but that's not necessarily a bad clubhouse guy. And you've already seen so quickly, in the Royals clubhouse, when he's in the dugout, when he's out on the team, he's already learned all the celebrations. He was the Salvi Splash guy on Wednesday, I think it was. Yeah, it was a 3-run home run game. And he's pointing the dugout and joking and chuckling with MJ and Bobby. You can tell they've embraced him a little bit. And they know he's been there before. They know that he has been in the playoff push. And even last year, he had the same role for the Arizona Diamondbacks and was a big reason why they got to the World Series. But to me, I think the clubhouse toxicness, if you will, or that rumor that was started really came from him slapping Jock Peterson over a fantasy football thing. And yeah, it definitely became a huge story. But Tommy Pham is, I think, a guy that a lot of people love to have on their team. He's a fiery guy. He's a competitor. And the fact that he's been on 3 teams this year and can come in and be so respected and be just as passionate and as enthusiastic as he was in Chicago, playing for a team that wasn't winning anything, no, it shows you that that's important to have in the clubhouse. It's important to have a veteran like that, a guy that has been to the postseason, has played in a lot of postseason games, and he can be a big factor in your lineup. He can be a good leadoff hitter, and the Royals didn't have one. Tommy Pham was the perfect leadoff hitter for him, and he's brought them this spark. He has brought them an energy that they just weren't getting shortly after the Vinny Pasquantino injury. And now you look at him as an everyday player for the Royals. Even with Hunter Renfroe back, they are putting Tommy Pham in the lineup out there every single day. And like I said, I don't blame anybody for being against it, because you had some stats to back it up. The negative WAR, the batted ball profile, all these things that weren't supportive of Tommy Pham being a good pickup. But the question became, is Tommy Pham better than Adam Frazier or Dairon Blanco or Garrett Hampson? And I think the answer was pretty easy for J.J. Picollo, which is why he got not one, but three guys to kind of fill that production that Vinny Pasquantino was leaving. You weren't going to completely do it, but you did need a little bit of an upgrade. And Yuli Gurriel has done his job, Grossman's done his job, and Tommy Pham has certainly done his job since joining the Kansas City Royals. Today, kind of a quiet outing, but he did get on base twice in this game, led off the game with a walk, and then had another big walk later on in the game. So Tommy Pham, as a leadoff hitter, has been a huge boost for the Royals. And from what I can tell in the clubhouse, a guy that absolutely has earned his stripes. And I think they like having him around. And when you're playing well and your team's pushing towards the postseason, you look to guys who have done this before, and especially guys that have done it before in a very similar situation that the Royals are going through in 2024. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll preview the upcoming series against the New York Yankees. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. The Royals will begin a 3-game series in the Bronx beginning tomorrow. It'll be the Royals and the Yankees at 6:05 on Monday, a 6:05 first pitch on Tuesday, and a 6:05 first pitch on Wednesday. So all 3 night games at Yankee Stadium. They will see Carlos Rodon on Monday. They'll see Marcus Stroman on Saturday, and they'll see Luis Gil, the phenomenal rookie, on Wednesday night. The Royals will have Cole Reagans in that game on Wednesday. Then they'll have Seth Lugo on Tuesday, but it'll be Brady Singer and Carlos Rodon on Monday night. The Royals will take a 4-game winning streak into this series. It'll be the final 3 games of the gauntlet, as they are 8-9 through the first 17 games. They dealt with a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries, but it's all going to come to an end on Wednesday. Then they'll have a very fun series at one of the most gorgeous ballparks, in my opinion, in baseball, in PNC Park, over the weekend. They will then host Detroit for 3 in Kansas City, 3 against the Giants on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Nationals for 3 in that final week of the season, and the Braves will wrap it up in that final weekend series of the year. So lots of unique opponents on deck, but still an American League opponent coming up tomorrow, and a Yankees team that really beat up on the Royals back in mid-June. And the Royals did see Carlos Rodon back in that series. In fact, Rodon had pitched on June 10th against the Royals in that series and shoved. It was 7 innings, a 1-run ball. Didn't really rack up the strikeout total that we've all become accustomed to in Carlos Rodon's career. I mean, he's a big strikeout pitcher, 172 this year and 152 in a third innings. But against the Royals, he was just getting ahead in certain counts, but the Royals were still putting him in play, just not that well. And that was a night in which Seth Lugo started. A little bit of bad luck in that game, got squeezed, and the Royals offense didn't do enough. If it wasn't for a wild comeback in the 9th inning, the Yankees would have swept the Royals in all 4 games at Kansas City. And that was a little bit of a turning point when the Royals had walked off the Yankees, because it was during a point in time in the season where the Royals had lost a lot of ground in the Central race. They were kind of on the cusp of losing their playoff spot, and June wasn't the best month for the Royals, but they were getting challenged by some really good teams, and the Yankees were one of them. So they saw Carlos Rodon in that series. They also saw Marcus Stroman in that series, who they'll see on Tuesday night. And Rodon is a little bit different of a pitcher than he was back in June. After that start against the Royals, in which he finished with a 2.93 ERA, he really struggled. He got knocked around against Boston the very next start. He really got knocked around against the Braves and giving up 11 hits, 7 earned runs, and 3 home runs in just 3 2/3. Then he gave up 8 earned in 5 innings against Toronto. So he finished the month of June with a 7.76 ERA. In July, he finished with a 4.05 ERA, so good, not great. He still was getting some pretty big strikeout numbers and not dealing with as many base runners as he was back in June. And then in August, a 4.15 ERA in 5 starts. He had 32 strikeouts in 26 innings of work. And last time out, his first start of September, he went 6 innings of 1-run ball and struck out 11 and threw just 99 pitches in that outing. So Carlos Rodon is a little bit of a mixed bag of he could give up 4 or 5 runs, but he's also going to get a lot of strikeouts in that game unless he is facing the Royals. And if I'm not mistaken, 3 strikeouts this year tied the second lowest total that he's had all season long. Yes, because he only had 2 strikeouts in his outing against the Padres, and he went 6 shutout innings there, but didn't get a lot of strikeouts, didn't get a lot of swing and miss. And then he also had 3 strikeouts against the Braves, but he got roughed up, and that was the 7 earned run game, 11 hits against Atlanta. So the Royals were a team that put the ball in play, but like the Padres, didn't really get much off of him. But he's coming off a really good start against the Rangers. However, it has been a rougher-ish 2 months for him in the Yankees rotation. He's definitely not as hot as he was going into that start at Kauffman Stadium all the way back in mid-June. So it'll be Rodon and his 14 wins on Monday night against Brady Singer, going for his 10th win of the year. And Brady Singer has been, in my opinion, really good over his last 2 starts or so. Gave up only 2 against Houston, 2 earned, that is, and then gave up 2 earned against Cleveland. I thought pitched well enough to win. He bounced back from that outing he had against Philadelphia, giving up the 11 hits, a lot of lefties in the lineup. And against the Yankees, a place that he's actually pitched pretty well in before, he is carrying back-to-back really good outings against some playoff teams. So a good test for Singer tomorrow night. Then on Tuesday, the Royals will see Marcus Stroman, Seth Lugo, who, like Singer, has looked really good in his last 2 outings, going 7 innings and giving up just 1 earned run. They are going to be facing Marcus Stroman, who we had plenty of talks about in the offseason of if he was actually going to sign with the Royals. And now I'm glad that the Royals went with Wacha and Lugo because they've just simply had better numbers and a better season for a Royals team that is really overachieving from what the expectation was. And the Yankees, I think, are right on par with where a lot of people thought they would be. But it has been a rough time for Marcus Stroman going back to about, let's say the beginning of July or toward the end of June. It's just been a really, really complicated for him to get deep into games. I would say in complications, I mean, there's been outings that I think he's pitched well enough, just dealt with a lot of base runners. So the complications to that is that I can't really say that he's been awful, but he hasn't really been good for that matter. In his last 15 starts, he's posted a 5.38 ERA. In his last 7 starts, he's posted a 5.79 ERA. So close to 6 runs there. He gave up 5 earned and 3 2/3 against the Rangers, but then had 7 innings of 2-run ball against the Cardinals, though gave up 9 hits. So that's kind of going to that point of the total of hits. A lot of base runners that he's been dealing with during these struggles. He had a 4.56 ERA in the month of August. In July, 5.5 and 5.13 in the month of June. So going into that start against Kansas City, he was pitching his best baseball of the year. In May, he was phenomenal, 1.67 ERA in 6 starts, but it really just kind of tailed off. And to me, it began shortly after that start he made in Kansas City. He had been roughed up a little bit against the Braves and against the Blue Jays and didn't pitch that well against the Reds, in which he gave up 3 home runs on July 4th. He didn't work that deep into the game against the Tampa Bay Rays on July 10th, went 4 1/3, 7 hits, only 1 earned run. And that's, again, I keep tying back to the complications. It's complicated than talking about Marcus Stroman because I don't think the numbers overall are that bad, but lots of base runners. 7 hits in that outing I was just talking about. He gave up 9 hits on July 27th, 8 hits on August 2nd, 9 hits on August 30th, 9 hits on September 4th. So you're dealing with a lot of base runners, but not everybody's been able to cash in off of them. So the Royals will get their second go-around with Marcus Stroman. Still one of my favorite pitchers to watch, at least on the American League side, because of the passion, the fieriness he brings. And Seth Lugo is the complete opposite. Now, not in terms of watchability. I love watching Seth Lugo pitch, and he's been one of the best arms for the Royals in recent memories. He's just stoic. He does not show a lot of emotion, or Marcus Stroman is going to show a lot of emotion. So a really good pitching matchup on Tuesday. Lugo Stroman at 6:05 p.m. Central Time. And then on Wednesday, you're going to get two very good young up-and-coming arms, if you even want to call them up-and-coming anymore. Cole Ragans and Luis Gil. Ragans coming off that 6 shutout start against the Minnesota Twins on Friday, and Luis Gil was very, very good in his last outing, in which he went 6 shutout innings against the Chicago Cubs, gave up only 1 hit during that stretch, but he had been roughed up in his previous 2 outings before that against Cleveland and against the White Sox. Surprisingly, gave up 7 hits, 4 earned in 4 innings of work, but he has really been recapturing what he was doing back in April over the last 7 starts or so. He's got 40 strikeouts in 34 1/3 innings, 151 Ks on the year, and 130 innings of work there, dealing with below the league average in runners on, or whip, at 1.16. So the Luis Gil, to me, will be a very tough matchup for the Royals. And if I'm not mistaken, the Royals didn't see him when the Yankees visited Kansas City back in mid-June. Yeah, they had just missed him. I think that he was going to be somebody that they were going to see in the 5th game. I think that's the way it worked, because he started on June 9th, so just missed the beginning of that series, and then started on June 14th. So that game will also be televised on MLB Network, I think, for fans that are out of market. So Ragans and Gill on Wednesday afternoon. That'll be the 20th and final game of the gauntlet for Kansas City. We'll see if they'll finish with a winning record in those 20 games, a 500 record, or slightly under 500, but should be a lot of fun, and maybe an early preview of a potential playoff matchup coming up here in about a month or so. So Royals and Yankees in the Bronx to close out the gauntlet and to wrap up this season series, in which the Royals go in down 1-3 in this season set. So 3 more games to go in the Bronx, and the Royals will head to Pittsburgh to take on the Pirates at PNC Park, which I believe they will see Paul Skeens in that series. So lots of fun this coming week, and hope you enjoyed this episode of Locked On Royals, a unique one in which we have it on a Sunday night, but back to normal this coming week, Monday through Friday. Should have lots to get into with the Royals team that is now carrying a 4-game winning streak. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.